Hey everyone, today I'm going to be talking about some things you can do to keep your animals safe during a power outage, especially in the winter when it starts to get cold. Now in here, when the power goes out, that means the air pump will stop, so the aeration's going to stop, the filtration will stop, meaning the water won't be passing through the filter cartridges to clean it anymore. In here, I do have plants, which is a plus, but the ultraviolet light will no longer be working without power. Also, the power head for circulation will shut off. So here's some important things that you can do, especially in this cage. I keep it around 80 degrees because I do have a tropical Placo in here, and we haven't had a major power outage around here since October in 2011, where the power was out for almost 2 weeks. And back then, I was able to keep the animals alive by I took a whole bunch of water bottles and I filled them up with hot water, and I floated them inside the tank, and that water started to heat up around it. By doing that, I was able to keep the animal alive. But when you do something like that, you have to keep a close eye on the temperature of the water because you don't want to heat it up too much because that could hurt the animals. And if you have a gas water heater, that is a huge plus because it will run during a power outage, or a gas stove where you can heat up water for the aquarium. I recommend putting it in water bottles, floating it in the tank, so by conduction it'll heat up all the water. I don't recommend pouring the water directly in here, although if you had to, you could pour some water in here that you boiled on the stove, but you got to be careful because if you pour it too close to the glass, it will crack it. Even the steam above it will crack the glass. In here, it could melt something. It would kill the plants, so I don't recommend that. I recommend floating a bottle in here. And also, if you are taking it from a water heater, when water goes through copper plumbing, especially when it's boiled, it starts deteriorating the copper. That's why it's not recommended you drink from a water heater, because they'll have all the metals in it. Also, something else I have that I actually just bought in case of a power outage is this thing here. This is a standby air pump. So basically what this thing does, it has 2D batteries. Depending on what kind of battery you buy is how long it'll last. If you buy cheap dollar store batteries, it'll probably only run a few hours. If you get the expensive lithium-ion batteries, it'll probably last a while. So what this thing does is it's completely standby. If you plug this in the wall, you cannot use it as a regular pump. It came with this, which is very short, so I'm just going to have to use my own to be able to supply this. So this cost about $14 online. And what this thing does is this here only monitors if there's power in the building. So you'd have this one set up along with the regular one. When the power goes off, this cord is just to detect it. When the power shuts off, this thing starts pumping automatically into the aquarium. You cannot use rechargeable batteries. It doesn't work that way. It won't charge them. Also, something else that you can think about, if you have animals like a tarantula, something like that, animals that don't breathe a lot of air. I've done this in the past, especially now that I have a few snails. If this snail was to need warmth during a power outage, I would probably put it inside a glass jar and float it in a tub of warm water around 80 degrees. You got to make sure the water's not too hot. Also in the past, something I've done with pet snakes, something like that. If you don't have a generator or any way to keep the heat mats running, you can take a big styrofoam cooler and a cage like this, put the snake inside a cage like this, and you can put like a bottle in there full of warm water, especially if they're a restrictor. They'll go around that to keep warm. Got to make sure it's not too hot once again. That's something I've done in the past, and it's worked to keep the animal alive. And there's also something else that I have seen. These things start to get expensive. They start around $60, and if you want a lithium-ion one that'll probably last you a week, that's going to run about $300. They pretty much have, like I have a power strip here. They have power strips where it's this gigantic box plugged into the wall. Everything on there is working, but if the power goes out, there's a giant battery and transformer that ups the voltage to 120, and that'll keep everything running for a while. It's a giant battery backup. And depending how many things you have plugged into it, that could last up to a week, especially if you're running these heaters. Like the heaters I have, that bigger one there I think is 150 watts. So you'd have to do some math on that depending on what you're running. During a power outage, I'd probably shut the filters off in this because there's only one animal. And I just have the important heat and air running. But if you're somebody that has a lot of aquariums and a lot of reptiles that need to be kept warm, I'd recommend you don't get the giant battery pack because, like I said, those get pretty expensive. $300. It's good if you're someone who's away a lot because it's standby. It turns on by itself. But if you're someone that's home, probably just buy a regular portable gas generator. That would probably be your best bet. Those run around $300 for a good one. But if you can afford it, a standby generator is the best thing. That I can't afford something like that, so I would just do the thing like floating water bottles in here. I've done that in the past. I have a pet pigeon. The pet pigeon doesn't really require heat because it is a pigeon. It's not a tropical bird. My pigeon during a power outage once where the power was out 2 weeks, it actually got so cold the water froze inside the bird's cage, but the bird was fine because that kind of bird is meant to be in cold weather during the winter. They have no problem surviving that. The only thing that would affect a bird is a cold draft, but cold itself is okay. Thanks for watching.